Very good. Okay, so hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are based today. My name is Wilson. I'm based in Newbury, UK. It would be great if you could share in the comments where you're joining from so that we can see the reach of this event geographically. As I said, I'm based in Newbury. I'm a Scrum Master working here in Vodafone HQ, and I'm also the founder of the Newbury Agile Group, and I'd like to welcome all of you. Before we proceed anymore, we would like to do an icebreaker networking breakout kind of things, because one of the things I like about meetups, at least when they happened in person, was to meet some people, expand my network, and having those conversations. So I don't want to lose that, and we can try to simulate that a little bit. Just before I do the breakout, there are a few notes that I'd like to share with you, and the easiest way to do this is presenting my screen. Give me just a moment. Okay, I hope my screen is visible by now. Yeah, okay, cool. So please stay on mute for a better experience for all of you and for our speaker as well. As I said, the session is being recorded. Any links, any pictures, photos, recording will be available through the Meetup page and any social pages like LinkedIn. There will be a Q&A at the end of the session. I have already provided the Slido link. In case you missed it, you can point out your phone to the QR code, or you can wait a little bit and I will share in the chat in a little bit so that you can put your questions there. And at the end, when the Q&A starts, I'll pick up the questions from there. You can upvote questions from other people. If you already have a similar question, probably it doesn't worth writing it down, just upvote the other one that is similar to yours. And before you leave this session, I'd love to get your feedback. I will also put on the chat the URL for the chat for the feedback, but it's this tiny URL. And yeah, and that's it. If there aren't any questions or anything, let's just move on to the breakout. So I will give around, I'll break out people and we'll give 4 minutes. Please introduce yourself to whoever you end up with in your breakout room. Share anything like product ownership, what you expect from this session, etc. And then by in the end of 4 minutes, we will be back to this main room, and then I will introduce our guest speaker for this evening. Okay, so let me just do the breakout rooms. I won't participate, unfortunately. I miss always these ones because I have to stay at the door to see if anyone is coming, so that they don't feel, oh, where's everyone? Nobody's on the Zoom, and they leave. So, okay, you will see now the breakout rooms being created, and you'll be able to go there. Open all rooms, options, breakout rooms closed at the end of 4 minutes. You will have a notification and set countdown to 15 seconds. There you go. So you'll be able to see now a message inviting you to go to the breakout room. See you guys in a bit. And now let's then continue. I'd like now to introduce Roman Pichler. He doesn't need an intro, but he certainly deserves one. Roman is well known in the Agile community. He has wrote several books. Probably the most famous is probably this green and black cover one that has helped me and been a reference for me while studying for my professional Scrum product owner certification, and just in general to increase my knowledge. He's famous for another tool that I use a lot with my teams, which is the product vision boards. I will share the link afterwards, but it's a very good tool as well. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Roman, let him talk a little bit more about himself, and then move on to his speech. Roman, to you.
Yeah, thank you, Wilson, for the kind introduction, and it's really nice to be with you. So very much looking forward to sharing some thoughts on the product owner role with you, and then hearing your perspectives and questions. So I've got a few slides prepared. I'll just try and share those slides with you. Oh, not quite, sorry. I do use Zoom a lot, but I'm always lost with all the little windows that come with it. But I think it's, generally speaking, a great product. Anyway, so hopefully you can see a slide that says reflection on the product owner role. So as I said, that's what I'd like to offer. The plan is, my intention is to speak for about 30 minutes or so. And then, yeah, again, very much appreciate your perspective and your questions. So I don't know how you feel about this, but I've been now working with Scrum product owners since 2004. And I feel that nearly 20 years since this book was published, which some of you may have had a look at, Agile Software Development with Scrum, which was written by Ken Schwaber and the late Mike Beadle. There's still a lot of confusion around what exactly is a product owner, particularly a Scrum product owner, and how should we apply the role. So I'd like to share my thoughts, my views on this, and I'm hoping to help you reflect on your understanding and maybe possibly improve it. And the first thing I'd like to do is really look at a quote from the current version of the Scrum Guide. It's the 2017 version that is still the latest one. And I think it says in there that the product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product. Now, a lot of people emphasize the value piece, and understanding what value is obviously very important for anybody who plays the role of a Scrum product owner. But I'd like to start by looking at the product. I think it might be even more fundamental. So I think it's very hard to understand what product ownership means if we're not clear what a product is. And this may sound trivial, but most organizations, I think all organizations I've worked for and I've worked with, didn't have a shared common understanding of what a digital product is. So usually I find there's quite a bit of confusion. What really is a product? So my suggestion is that a product is something that creates value for a group of people, users, and possibly also customers in the business. So there has to be a clear reason for a distinct group of people to interact with the product, use it, or possibly pay for it in one way or the other. And the product has to create some value for the company. That could be generating revenue or achieving a certain profit margin, but it could also be reduced cost by increasing productivity. It could be around developing the brand or giving the company an advantage by creating new technologies. All these are, in my mind, valid business goals, but there has to be at least one clear business goal. And again, as I said, there has to be a clear need for people to interact with the product. The product has to address a problem or offer a benefit, do a specific job for the users, or help the users achieve a goal. So that, in my mind, is a product. Now, if that's a definition, a reasonable definition of what a product is, then what about the product owner? Well, for me, in order to be able to maximize the value a product creates, a product owner should really own a product in its entirety, so that the whole thing, right? But that's not how I find the product owner role, certainly the Scrum product owner role, being applied. And so I meet people who introduce themselves to me as a product owner, and they manage much more than a product. And then I meet people who say, I'm a product owner, but actually they don't quite manage a product. They manage an aspect of it or a part of it. So I thought it might be helpful to reflect on the different levels of ownerships or types of ownerships that we can get. And so there are 6 types of, owners, but there's only one Scrum product owner amongst them. So here is the Scrum product owner. And as I suggested, I find it helpful to say the Scrum product owner really owns a product in its entirety, which means if you do Scrum, then I would suggest that every product has exactly one Scrum product owner. Now, some products, and some of the products that you might be working on, are too big to be managed by a single person. They have lots of features. They may have lots of parts. And so it can be useful to involve other owners and have more focused ownership. So it can be useful to have somebody who owns a feature. So I'm using here Microsoft PowerPoint to share these slides with you. And I'd say Microsoft PowerPoint would be a product, would be a digital product. A feature of it would be the ability to put my slides into presentation mode, or the ability to open a slide or save that slide or close that slide, right? So feature is a part of a product that end users interact with. Now, the difference between a Scrum product owner and a feature owner is that the Scrum product owner is responsible for the success of the product, making the product successful or keeping it successful. Whereas a feature owner has still ownership, but on a more focused level. As a feature owner, I'm responsible now for the persistence capability of, say, a productivity tool like Microsoft PowerPoint. I still need to be aware of the market and the users. I still need to understand how the users might want to interact with the product. But I'm not responsible for the entire product. I take responsibility for a part of the product or an area of the product, for the feature or the features that I look after. And then sometimes I meet people who say, well, I'm a product owner. But when I talk to them, it turns out actually what they own is not so much a product. It's not so much a feature either. It's more an architecture building block or a component. I mean, that could be a component in a traditional sense. Think of, say, an EJB, but it could also be a service or possibly a collection of microservices. Say the persistence part of a product. That could be owned by what I would then refer to as a component owner. And the interesting thing about being a component owner is that I now have an internal building block that I look after. And in order to do that, I usually need detailed technical know-how. And again, my work will be much more focused than the work of an overall Scrum product owner. What other owners do we have? Well, we have, of course, another product owner, the safe product owner. And I'll say a little bit more about the difference between the Scrum product owner and the safe product owner in a minute, or at least my take on it, my understanding. But just briefly, the safe product owner doesn't have ownership in the same sense as a Scrum product owner. A Scrum product owner really has full stack ownership, owns the product top to bottom. A safe product owner, to put it simply, owns the tactical aspects of a product. Manages the user stories and manages a team backlog. So it's more an execution role, whereas I very much see the Scrum product owner as somebody who is responsible for discovery, product vision, product strategy, product discovery and product strategy, product road mapping, and product backlog management. The safe product owner is very much focused on the product backlog or just parts of a product backlog. And then we have, here what I call in this diagram a platform owner. And a platform owner would be somebody who owns an internal product, a collection of assets, services, or components that is shared amongst different, say, apps that sit on top of the product. Now, why did I call out this role specifically as a platform owner? In the end, it is like a Scrum product owner, but very much focused on a technical product. And so again, the difference between a Scrum product owner, generally speaking, and somebody who owns something like a platform is that a platform owner will need, that's at least my experience, in-depth technical knowledge. Whereas generally speaking, I wouldn't expect that that's the case for a Scrum product owner. I should maybe very briefly explain why that is. Similarly to a component owner, a platform owner will have to talk to to the users, and the users of a platform are the development teams that build apps that sit on top of it. And in order to be able to talk to the developers of those apps, I need to be able to understand a little bit about how the platform is built, and certainly talk about interfaces and interface changes. So I should be quite comfortable at that level. And then finally, when we look at everything that's currently here on this slide, we could say really it's a collection of assets. It's a collection of products. We have at least 2 products, and those 2 products sit on a platform. Well, if we have more than one product, then we have a product portfolio or product family, a product suite, as it's sometimes referred to, or a product line. And so in that case, it may make sense to have somebody who owns this collection of products, and that person might be called a portfolio owner, or a product line owner, or whatever might be appropriate. But again, the difference is here between, say, somebody like a product portfolio owner and a Scrum product owner, that as a product portfolio owner, I have to maximize the value of several products. And so I have to sort of help the individuals who look after the separate products, the individual products, to work together. So I may want to try and harmonize their strategies and certainly their roadmaps. I may want to help them identify dependencies. But I'm usually also responsible for managing that product and product portfolio, and making sure it's healthy, it's balanced. So there's a good mix of young and old products in there. Yeah. So again, a different responsibility. And with these different responsibilities, obviously, there are different skills requirements for those individual roles. So a Scrum product owner, usually, that's at least my experience, somebody who is responsible for an entire product, has to understand the market, the domain, the users and customers, has to understand how the product can be monetized, how value can be created for the company, often has to understand a little bit about the underlying business model, or sometimes has to create a financial forecast. So those are skills that, say, a feature owner or component owner or a safe product owner don't require. Yeah. And the last thing I'd like to say about this diagram is this is not intended to make anyone feel uncomfortable or bad. I hope you didn't interpret it that way. So whatever, if you find, according to Roman's classification, yeah, I'm a feature owner, then that's cool. That's perfectly cool. Being a feature owner, being a component owner, being a platform owner, being a safe product owner can be very interesting and can be very challenging. But these roles and the specific jobs that people then have to do are just a little bit different from what a Scrum product owner would do. And I think that's important to recognize. Yeah. So if we call everyone a product owner, then usually that creates quite a lot of confusion. And I've seen more than one company where that was the case, where people owning different assets that were all called product owner. And again, that makes it kind of difficult to come up with something like role-specific learning and development programs. And everybody gets sent to certain training courses, even if that's not necessarily beneficial. Cool. The next thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the difference that I see between a Scrum product owner and a safe product owner. And in order to do so, I'm showing here a very simplified version of Mike Cohn's planning onion. So this onion here only looks at vision, strategy, and tactics. So product vision, that is product strategy, and then the tactics, the execution. And I would say that a Scrum product owner really owns a product holistically, or has a full stack ownership from top to bottom, from vision to ultimately product backlog items. A product owner doesn't have to determine all the product items, and I'd argue a product owner shouldn't determine all the product backlog items, certainly not on her own or his own. But what a product owner ultimately should be authorized to do is determine the priority and thereby say what gets done and what doesn't get done and in which order. But I think equally a product owner should set the vision, the purpose of why a product exists. So an example I like to use, it would be if I wanted to create a product that helps people become more aware of what they eat and how much they eat, then the vision behind that product could be healthy eating or help people eat more healthily. So that'd be maybe a nice vision. And then the strategy could be, well, to address a middle-aged man like myself whose eating habits may not be super healthy. And then the benefit could be to reduce the risk of getting type 2 diabetes. And then I might want to think about some standout features such as seamless integration with smartwatches and smart scales, and maybe some other standout features that I can't think of off the top of my head. 3 to 5 standout features is something that I would usually look for in a strategy. And then business goals, and that could be to diversify a business and generate a new revenue stream. And in addition to that high-level strategy, I'd then take the next step and derive a product roadmap that says, okay, now how might that product evolve over the next few releases, over the next, say, 6 to 12 months? What be the main goal of the very first release, the MVP, and then can I think about a goal for the subsequent release, possibly? But also, then, as I've mentioned, the product owner, should be at least involved in prioritizing and managing and updating the product backlog. So I think we've got full stack ownership here. However, in SAFe, my understanding is, and I've already mentioned it earlier, that a SAFe product owner is more focused on the tactics, more focused on a product backlog management and user story and interacting with the development team. And then another role takes care of vision and strategy, and that will be then the SAFe product manager. Right. So what we have here is partial ownership, or you could say the ownership is simply split between a SAFe product manager and a SAFe product owner. And that's done in order to facilitate scaling. So working with a strategic product role and a tactical product role is a common scaling technique, but it's certainly not the only one, and not necessarily the best one, I would argue, excuse me, that's available. Now, some of you might say, hold on a second, why do we have a Scrum product owner here and a product manager on the right-hand side? Is there a difference between product managers and product owners? Well, I'd argue not really. Some of you might know that in, I think, the first version of Scrum, the product owner was actually called product manager. And Ken Schwaber, one of the Scrum founders, then changed the term to product owner to emphasize the empowerment aspect, to make clear that somebody who works as a product owner must have the authority to own the product on behalf of the company. Unfortunately, I think that's been lost in the past, I don't know, nearly 25 years or something. In hindsight, I think when the Scrum terminology was largely formulated in the late 1990s, product management was so different to what it is, what it's like today. And I think, back then, product managers, they were just doing a very different job. They were essentially doing some of the upfront market research and product planning and business analysis, and then would create a requirement specification, hand it off to a project manager who would then get it executed with one or more development teams. And of course, the type of interaction that is envisioned in Scrum between a product owner, a product person, and the development teams is completely different. So I think, historically, it probably made sense that Scrum used a different term here just to emphasize there's a difference. But unfortunately, particularly, with the terminology that SAFe uses these days, I find that many people think like, product managers means if I'm a product manager, that's a really cool role, very important role. And if I'm a product owner, then that's more like, also like a team lead, team manager, product backlog manager, user story writer is not that good. But again, I think to a certain extent, that's been that impression has been created by the use of the terms in SAFe. So I've always looked at the Scrum product owner as a product manager in an agile context, so as an agile product manager. That's always been my view. The next thing I'd like to sort of briefly touch upon is the right interactions and establishing the right relationships as the person in charge of the product, as the product owner. And so I find it really helpful to try and have direct access to users and customers as the Scrum product owner. That's not only to validate ideas and maybe generate new ones, but maybe more importantly, to be able to truly understand and empathize with the users and customers, to really understand how they work or the context in which they currently use the product or a competitor product. And what works for them well, what doesn't work well for them, what are the things that they're struggling with. So I think that is really, really important to be able to maximize the value a product creates. And my rule of thumb is if you work as a Scrum product owner, try and meet users, at least selected users and selected customers face-to-face once a quarter, at least once a quarter. And I know with everything going on at present, that's hard. And sometimes it's hard anyway, because your users and customers might be in a different region. But then try and have a meeting like we're having it now, set up a video conference, a video call, and again, make an effort to reach out, make an effort and get feedback, make an effort and have user interviews, or if you can, observe how users use your product in the wild, ideally. I assume that those of you who work as Scrum product owners use data and analytics, and I think that's great. It's amazing when we reflect on the analytics capabilities that we usually have these days. But I think it's very hard to empathize with data. I haven't been able to do so. So, data only, I think, gives you part of the picture. And the second part of the picture is then the qualitative aspect. You could say the qualitative research, again, reaching out to people, talking to people, and see what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And then, of course, we have the internal stakeholders, the business stakeholders. So those are individuals maybe from marketing, sales, support, service, maybe finance, possibly operations, or another business unit or department. And what I like to suggest when it comes to aligning and guiding the business stakeholders is to involve them early and frequently. I think it's really, really nice to have the stakeholders involved in sprint review meetings at least once a month. But I think in addition to that, it's great to run bi-monthly or quarterly strategy review meetings, where you look at your product strategy and your product roadmap, and you discuss any changes that you may have to make or want to make, including ideas for new, bigger features or bigger changes to existing features. And speaking about product strategy, I think generally it's nice to try and have a collaborative approach to product discovery and involve the key stakeholders in those product discovery and product strategy activities. And the benefit is for you that you can leverage then the individual's expertise and knowledge and creativity, that you create a shared understanding. So everybody has a common understanding, of the decisions that you make. And maybe most importantly, when you invite people to participate in a decision-making process and to contribute to a decision, they're more likely to support that decision. They're more likely to see it through. I mean, the worst thing is that you create the strategy, you create a roadmap, and then you try and sell it to the stakeholders, and they're like, yeah, but do whatever they think is right. And the same is true, by the way, for the development team. So I think it's great to involve development team representatives in discovery and strategy work. Oh yes, there's the Scrum product owner, and then just people go away and do what they think is right, or even worse, you end up being a feature broker. You go from a business stakeholder to business stakeholder and try and please everyone. But that is not our job as Scrum product owners. We're not there to please the stakeholders. We're there to maximize the value the product creates. And again, I think it's great to involve people actively, to pull people in, draw people in. Listen to people's perspectives and ideas, their concerns, see what their needs and goals are, but then ultimately find a decision and move the product forward so that you have the maximum support possible but also do what is right for your product, do what is right for the users, do what is right for the business, right? Oh, how many times did I say right there? A few times. What else do I have? Oh yes, so I've got 2 more slides. Just checking the time. How am I doing? Okay, so I've got 2 more slides. This one is on really the setup and the relationship between the 3 Scrum roles. So we've got the Scrum product owner, which I've talked about quite a bit. We've got the development team here and the Scrum master. Now, as you probably all know, Scrum suggests that those 3 individuals should work closely together. So you should have a trustful and respectful relationship. There should be trustful connections established between those individuals. Now, what I sometimes find is that Scrum product owners are very much drawn to cover. That's the right verb, to cover some of the work the development team does, but particularly the Scrum Master does. So I often find that Scrum product owners, not all Scrum product owners have a Scrum Master or have a Scrum Master who's sufficiently available or qualified. And so what that then means is that a job that's already pretty demanding and has lots to it, lots of facets, becomes virtually extremely hard and ultimately unsustainable. So what should be the focus then of Scrum product owners? Well, I would suggest the focus should be to provide product leadership. And that means to set a vision and help develop a valid product strategy and an actionable product roadmap. That tells us more about the benefits that the product should create, but also how the product is likely to evolve and develop and grow. Prioritize the product backlog or help with the product backlog prioritization. And I wrote down here stakeholder community building, really draw in the stakeholders, as I suggested earlier, and try and encourage people to participate in, say, product discovery strategy work, but then also in the sprints in form of attending the sprint review meetings. Now, the development team, in my mind, should offer design and technology leadership. So a common mistake I would suggest, or I would call it a mistake that I see product owners make, is that product owners think, well, I have to feed my development team with detailed, fine-grained user stories, or I must. That's sort of a main part of my job. But I don't think it says anywhere in Scrum, certainly not the Scrum guide, that the Scrum product owner should be a product backlog item writer or is a user story scribe. As the Scrum product owner, you've got to make sure that there is a product backlog and that it's filled with meaningful items and that there are enough detailed high priority items to allow the team to progress the product in the next sprint. But Scrum doesn't mandate, as far as I know, who actually creates those items. And personally, I think it's really nice when the development team takes ownership of the product details and the solution. So when a Scrum product owner doesn't have to spoon it's been a long day, to spoon feed the development team with detailed user stories forever. Now, having said that, sometimes it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do when the team doesn't know much about the domain, about the users, about the user needs. And when product owner and development team haven't worked together maybe for some period. And then typically development teams crave very detailed stories that are essentially more or less seen as an equivalent to requirements. But as we all know, a user story is a narrative, as my colleague and friend Mike Cohen would say, plus a conversation. So the idea with certainly user stories, and generally when we look at agile requirements description techniques, is to capture only the bare minimum and move fast by having conversations. And I would sort of suggest you take this even further and try and co-author user stories, or think about how you can enable the development team, that the development team members can start writing some of those user stories on their own. So that's a little bit like helping a group of classically trained musicians who are used to playing from a music sheet with detailed instructions. And this is not to talk badly about classical musicians. because that's sort of what I do. I need this thing to make music, but help people like me to progress and become more like a jazz musician or member of a rock band, where we can improvise and we can make things up and we can take responsibility. We agree on maybe the type of songs that should be played, but then the details are left up to the jazz group, and the guys, as I said, are able to improvise. So if you are currently in a situation that a lot of your time is taken up with detailing product backlog items for the development team, then maybe use one of the upcoming retrospectives to reflect on why is that and what could you do in order to enable the team to take more ownership of the solution and play a more proactive role. And then, so generally, in order to be able to offer design and technology leadership, I think it's helpful for end user facing products to have a UX designer or have UX design skills in the development team and not have a separate design team. And of course, development capabilities, including architecture and testing. And as you probably all know anyway, the development team is a self-organizing team. And so the third role, the Scrum Master, I would view the Scrum Master responsible for offering process and people leadership. What do I mean by this? Process and method coaching, not only to the development team, but also to the product owner. So I really see the Scrum Master as an important, helpful partner for the product owner, and to the stakeholders in the wider organization. So it's related to being a collaboration catalyst, helping people work together and establish effective working relationships, but then also helping facilitate organizational change. So I've seen organizations change career progression plans, for instance, and role descriptions, and employee selection criteria as a direct consequence of establishing Scrum as an agile way of working in the business. And a Scrum Master, I think, be great if the Scrum Master could help with those kind of things and work with the leadership team and work with HR. There's one more responsibility or set of responsibilities that I'd like to quickly share with you, and that's shared between the development team and the product owner. So I'd say that's user research, really reaching out to the users and understanding the users and customers. And so in order to be able to own the solution and the product details, I think it's really important, really helpful for the development team members to get direct access to the users and be able to observe users or get feedback directly from the users, learn about the users and their needs. Sprint goal selection, again, is probably something that you're all aware of. The sprint goal should be agreed upon by the Scrum product owner and development team, so it should be a joint decision. And finally, product backlog refinement is also something that a Scrum product owner shouldn't do on her own or his own, but it's really something that should be done collaboratively together with the development team, or at least some of the development team members. And again, the benefit is you leverage the knowledge and creativity of the team, but you make it more likely that the development team members really understand the product backlog items and find them meaningful, right? I think it feels very different when you've kind of discovered user stories and helped discover and describe them in a backlog session, in a backlog workshop, compared to the product owner coming into the sprint planning meeting and putting some cards on the table, or these days just pushing a button and populating a task board in Jira. So I think the level, the motivation, the understanding, the involvement, the commitment is much stronger when development team members have the opportunity to help shape the product backlog. So again, for those of you who work as Scrum product owners, my suggestion is lead the product, do not lead the development team, and do not lead the process. Offering product leadership is hard enough. It's I find a very fascinating and usually satisfying job, but it is challenging. Do not take on responsibilities of the development team or Scrum Master, certainly not for an extended period of time. So don't cover UX design, the UX designer in the development team if that's what the team is lacking, or don't cover the Scrum Master role if there's no Scrum Master, certainly not on a continued basis. it's usually better then to stop and reflect and try and let those organizational impediments bubble up, and see how you can create an awareness in the organization, and who you can partner with in order then to maybe find a Scrum Master who can act as a partner for you, the development team, and the wider organization, including the stakeholders. And then the very last thing I'd like to say, and I'll try and make this quite brief, is in terms of skills for a Scrum product owner, I found it really helpful to look at 3 sets. So tactical skills, strategic skills, and leadership skills. And I'll just sort of say a few words about these groups of skills, these skill sets quickly. Oh yes, there was another Scrum product owner figure here. So tactical skills is the ability to work with the product backlog and prioritize a product backlog and update the product backlog, including analyzing feedback that you receive from users, or any data and analytics that you've collected based on product increment that you've deployed, that you've exposed to users and possibly customers. Maybe also things like writing personas, maybe things like having at least a little bit of a technical interest or understanding, so you can empathize with the development team. And strategic skills will be around, say, product lifecycle management and product strategy and product discovery, product roadmap, business modeling, maybe some creating a financial forecast, a business case. So I think these skills are also very, very important for Scrum product owners, and really they fit together. And these are the hard skills that we need in order to do our job. But in recent years, I found that the leadership skills are just as important as the hard skills are. Those are things around cultivating empathy and reaching out, cultivating an open mind, being able to reach out with people with empathy and an open mind, and listening, active listening, listening attentively to people, collaborative decision making, making decisions together, maybe possibly negotiating with people. So those are goal setting, I shouldn't forget, working with a vision, but then also maybe user goals, business goals, and appropriate product goals, and making sure that those goals are all tied together, that they are aligned. So those are all leadership skills that I think are just as important, but sometimes don't receive the attention that the hard skills, the strategic and the tactical skills receive. So ideally, I would suggest you'd like to have competencies in these 3 areas in order to be a truly well-rounded or competent Scrum product owner. And yeah, I think I've spoken longer than I intended to, at least a little bit, so apologies. Should we leave it there, Wilson, and start the Q&A session?
Yeah, sure, Roman. If you are comfortable with that, it's 10 to 7. How long do you think? When should I do a hard stop for the Q&A?
Well, I think it'd be cool, at least 15 minutes or 20 minutes for questions. As I said, I spoke a little bit longer than I thought I'd take. So yeah, it'd just be nice to be able to address sufficient questions. So there are a few more slides in my slide deck that I'm not showing to you, but I'll show you this very last slide. And first of all, to bluntly advertise my books. Sorry about this, and my website. But then for those of you, more importantly, for those of you whose question doesn't get answered for whatever reason, please feel free to email it to me. You can find the email address here. So please do reach out. But yes, let's hear some questions, please.
Sure. Okay, so we have plenty of questions. So starting from the most voted so far. So the question is like this: I have seen in a few organizations BA is also called a proxy product owner. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So business analysts are, I find, a somewhat specialized role. And certainly a business analyst doesn't seem to fit naturally into the Scrum roles, right? I mean, we've got a product owner, we've got a Scrum Master, we've got a development team. Where's the business analyst? Now, a business analyst traditionally would interact with the users and elicitate requirements. In some cases, analyze, describe and analyze business processes, and then, possibly initiate changes to those business processes, or model them, describe them, so that they can be automated and ultimately, automated, and software can be implemented. So it's around requirements, elicitation, requirements description, and then working with the development team. Now, some of that is done by the Scrum product owner, and some of it is done by the development team. But generally, I would suggest things like user research and product backlog refinement. Traditionally, we talk about requirements engineering is a collaborative approach. So there is not a single individual or a single role responsible for it, but it's shared between the Scrum product owner and the development team. So what sometimes happens is that you have a senior person, or you have a client, a customer, play the product owner role. And then you have a business analyst who looks after the product backlog and does the detailed work and helps write the user stories and works with the development team. And in that case, the business analyst would act like a proxy product owner, like a go between the real product owner, the real decision maker, and then the development team. Now, if that's a permanent solution, I would think it's not that amazing. It's not that great. It's not that ideal. Why? Because you don't have full stack ownership. You have partial ownership. You now have the ownership of the product split across two people. The person who plays the product owner role and the BA as the proxy product owner. I think as a long-term solution, it'd be worthwhile looking into changing that setup. But having said that, if it works for you and if everybody's happy, and if work is great and sustainable, then maybe that's, you don't have to change anything.
Great, thank you. Next one, this one is actually from me. So how can a product owner manage difficult stakeholders and be comfortable saying no?
Right, yeah, nice question. Thank you, Wilson, for asking it. So I think the first thing I'd like to say is that it is just, I think it's part and parcel of being a Scrum product owner that we have to offer some guidance and leadership to the stakeholders. And a great way to do that is by working with a product strategy and a product roadmap, which has been ideally created together with the stakeholders, or at least with the input of the stakeholders, and which you ideally update together with the stakeholders. But part of leading people, part of guiding people is the necessity to deal with difficult situations, and sometimes to deal with difficult stakeholders. And part of that is also to say no. Wasn't it Steve Jobs who allegedly once said, innovation is not about saying yes to every idea, but actually saying no to most ideas. And so in order to say no in a helpful way, what I would suggest is that you try and actively listen to the stakeholder, even if you think the idea is rubbish. Or even if you think, oh my God, it's Mark again, not Mark. Oh no, what's he gonna say again? I mean, sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes we have some preconceived notion and ideas about people, and and there's some biases at play. I mean, so try still make an effort and listen attentively, and try and be as open-minded as you can, because when you listen attentively, first of all, you might discover that actually it is a really good idea. Oh yes, we should do it. Oh my God, thank God Mark mentioned that idea to me. But even if that's not the case, if you still disagree, by truly listening to someone, you show appreciation, you show that you value the person. And in part of actively listening to Mark would be trying to understand, why is that, say Mark wants a feature, why is that feature important to Mark? What's the underlying need? What's the motivation? What's the goal for Mark? And once you've understood that, then first of all, there might be another way how you can address that need. But even if you can't, you've shown to Mark that you truly care, that you've understood him, or you've tried to understand him, you've made an effort, you're empathizing with him. And that makes it much more likely that he'll be able to accept the no. So if you just say to Mark, oh, what a silly idea. Oh, we can't do this. I mean, just sort of, make it quite black and white, then Mark probably would take offense, and I wouldn't blame him. Yeah, so it's really take the time to empathize. And I know that's not easy. I know we're all busy people. Product people tend to be busy. There's so many things that we have to do, but I think deprioritizing relationship building and deprioritizing kind of people issues and dealing with people, I think is a mistake, because it usually comes back. It sort of bites us in the backside sooner or later.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. It's certainly managing relationships as well, not only product backlog. Okay, so the next one is from my friend Andrew. What are your ideas around helping a Scrum product owner select or split user stories for a minimum viable product and selling that MVP to business stakeholders?
Right. Very nice question. Do I have... Oh, yes. So, yes, that was the image that I wanted to look for. So this is maybe a little bit complex, but as we're talking about product backlog and MVP, I think in order to be able to scope an MVP, just to make sure we all have the same understanding, stands for minimum viable product. That's a term that originated in Lean Startup. I think Eric Ries suggested it must have been about 10 years ago or so, the term MVP. And it's changed a little bit over the years. These days, when we talk about MVP, people typically mean the initial release, a good enough initial offering of a product. So why am I showing this this model here? Well, because I think in order to really scope a release and scope a release in particular an MVP and get the feature set right, it's really helpful to kind of backtrack, and it's really helpful to really start right on the left-hand side with a vision. Then also the product strategy that I've mentioned a few times. And then ideally, at least derive something like a goal or desired outcome or a benefit for your MVP from that product strategy. So again, if my goal is to help middle-aged men reduce the risk of getting type 2 diabetes, then I'd have to ask myself, okay, for the MVP, what would be a good outcome? What would be a good goal? What would be a good and realistic benefits that MVP could provide? And maybe from a business perspective, it's about building an initial user community. And from a user benefit perspective, maybe it's around developing some initial awareness of my eating habits. And I think that's what you really need, because once you've got that in place, then working with the product backlog and on the product backlog becomes so much easier. You now have that goal, that outcome, and that will essentially guide and lead your product backlog work. It'll help you scope your backlog. It'll help you focus on the right items in order to build and ship that MVP. If you don't have that, then the answer, I think, will be extremely difficult it'll be very difficult to get the right answer for your question. So often, if you have issues around stories in the product backlog, it's a symptom, and the cause is a little bit further up in the chain, a little bit further to the left here in this model that's shown here. Sorry, it's a fairly, I guess, complicated answer to a seemingly harmless question.
Andrew is giving a thumbs up, so he probably is happy with it. Okay, next one from Steve. He asks, what's the best thing a PO can do if they walk into a role where they don't have specific knowledge of the planned product?
Right. As it happens, I've got another slide that I can use. So I think my colleague, Ellen Gottsteiner, so if you're not familiar with Ellen's work, it might be worthwhile checking it out. Ellen's done a lot of good work around backlog and requirements. I really value Ellen's work. So Ellen, I think, was the first person who suggested that it may be useful to apply the T model to product management. And so the three skill sets that I showed you earlier, they belong to the horizontal part here of the T. the horizontal bar. So these are the transferable product management skills. But in addition to those, you need product specific ones. You need to understand generally the product category your product belongs to, the domain, the market that your product serves. It's good to be able to meet actual users and customers. You need to understand a little bit about the technologies, or can be helpful, just at least some superficial understanding of the technologies that are being used in order to build the product. Getting to know the organization and all the stakeholders and building a network there will be important as well. And I find that the vertical skills here, the product-specific skills, are more important to get started in a job than the horizontal ones. Usually when you don't have the knowledge about your product and the product specifics, it's kind of very, very difficult to start working as a product owner and do sort of a decent job. But at the same token, it's probably worthwhile balancing those two dimensions and making sure that you have also enough transferable skills and are able to methodically solve product management challenges. And so, do what needs to be done. Ideally, I would expect that your employer has a plan in place that allows you to get up to speed. So, I was something that I like to suggest, and I was just discussing it with a client yesterday in a workshop, is when new product owners come on board, that you onboard them and that you ask them to be a little bit like a product owner trainee for the first, say, 2 to 3 months, where essentially that product owner works with an established other product owner in order to understand a little bit more about how is product ownership practiced in the organization, get to understand and know the organization and so forth. So hopefully something like that is in place. If not, try and meet the stakeholders, obviously try and meet the development team, learn about the product and product domain as much as you can, and try and meet users, at least selected users, face to face. That was another long answer, sorry.
Very good. There aren't straightforward answers, isn't it? Next one is from Alan. Alan asks, some organizations push old school project managers into product owner roles, maybe with a 2-day course. What key skill would you push them towards to lessen the pain?
So I think, what I find helpful to do is when somebody is asked or would like to move into a product owner role. And so, when I say product owner, I mean Scrum product owner role. Then I think it's kind of helpful to reflect on what product management skills do I currently have, because for me, the Scrum product owner role is a product management role. So as a Scrum product owner, I need product management knowledge, and I need to be able to apply that knowledge. So I need the appropriate skills. So what product management knowledge has a project manager? And sometimes people have quite a bit of product management knowledge, particularly around, say, requirements and describing requirements, managing requirements, scope management. Those are all really valuable skills. That's great. And then I can ask, okay, what additional skills does the individual need in order to succeed in her or his job? And then once you've done that gap analysis, you can then take the final step and say, okay, what learning and development measures would help the individual now acquire the knowledge and be able to apply it? And that might be a training course, but it might be self-study, or it might be an in-person, how do you say, I should know this, a training course that is instructor-led, that was the word, the expression I was looking for, or it might be an e-learning course, whatever it might be, or it might be reading books, whatever it is, or, there might be a product coach, a product owner coach, or an experienced product owner might be able to act as a coach, whatever works. But I think important, again, is understand what are the current skills, understand what are the target skills, do that gap analysis, and then determine how do you get from A to B. And hopefully some of the models that I've shown you, like this team model here, and then, if you remember the 3 skills: leadership, strategic, and tactical skills, those kind of models should help you with your analysis, with your work.
You forgot one, which is joining meetups like this one, right?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Join the Agile and join the product community.
Exactly. It's a lot to learn from the community. We have 4 minutes still. So another question from Sergi. What is the key change in your understanding of the PO role between today and 5 or 10 years ago?
So I think today I'm probably more aware, or I'd emphasize more the product discovery, product strategy, and the leadership aspects than I did probably 10 years ago. I'd have to go back and reread my first book and some of my older blog posts. But yeah, I mean, I've certainly, in terms of also about how my work has evolved, I've certainly done much more work around product strategy and product leadership in the past 10 years. But yeah, it's again, it'd be a mistake, I think, to portray the Scrum product owner as primarily a tactical role or execution focused role. Yeah.
Okay, great. The next one we have is, how good should a product owner influencing skills be to facilitate collaboration between customers, stakeholders, and dev?
Sorry, can you say the first bit again?
So how good should a product owner influencing skills be
Okay, cool.
to facilitate collaboration?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, nice question. So these are all nice and really, really great questions. Thank you for asking them. So the ability to influence people and maybe particularly the stakeholders is a really crucial skill for Scrum product owners. And there's a very simple reason. We need to encourage a group of stakeholders and one or more development teams to move together in the same direction to progress the product and create value. The core challenge that we have is that as Scrum product owners, we lack what is referred to as transactional power. And so we're not the boss of the stakeholders. We're not the boss of the development teams. We can't tell people what to do. Even worse, we're usually not in a position that we can offer any incentives like a bonus or pay rise. So all we can do in order to encourage the individuals to show desirable behavior and again move together in the same direction is influence them. And influencing someone means that the person opens up to our perspectives, our views, and essentially listens to us and follows our advice. Now, how do we make that happen? Well, the key answer is by building a trustful relationship, by earning the trust of the stakeholders and the development teams. And there are a number of ways how you can earn trust. One very important factor or one very, very important technique is to empathize with the individuals and really try and understand what's happening for them, what they're feeling, what they're going through, and what their underlying needs are. So reaching out to them with warm-heartedness and taking a genuine respectful interest in them, no matter if you like them or dislike them, if you find them, likable people or difficult people, no matter if you agree with their views or not. I mean, we can empathize even with people that we find with whom we very strongly disagree and whose actions we again very much disagree with. So it's really cultivating that openness, that warmth, that warm-heartedness. So that would be my suggestion. But just be aware that empathy and influence empathy and trust shouldn't kind of be in a way abused to manipulate people. I think that'd be wrong. That'd be unethical. It's just a little disclaimer. So again, empathy and trust should always be genuine, and we should always try and genuinely care for people and take a genuine interest.
Thank you very much. We are on the clock, 10 past 7. We still had a lot of questions. We would stay here for another hour without any effort, but unfortunately we can't. So before you leave, please copy the feedback, that feedback URL, and fill it up. Won't take more than 10-15 seconds, but will mean a lot to me, to the speaker, so that we can improve as well going forwards, knowing what worked well and what could be improved. Thank you very much, Roman, for accepting my invite.
Well, thank you
And
for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
and thank you for everyone who has joined today. I will put the recording as soon as it's available. I will put it in the Meetup page, and I'll share the link in the LinkedIn and other social networks out there. So thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye bye.
Thank you. Cheers, bye.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.